In this video, we will talk about WebBlocker. We will cover what WebBlocker is and when you might want to use it. We will demonstrate how to configure WebBlocker, look at some of the WebBlocker reports, and we will discuss how to troubleshoot WebBlocker issues when there is a problem. Let's get started. WebBlocker is a web filtering service that allows you to control access to websites. WebBlocker is a cloud-based service as well. When websites are viewed by the user, a request is sent to the cloud using TLS to check the category of the site. The firebox must be able to resolve DNS and send HTTPS traffic to the internet for WebBlocker to function. There are many reasons you might want to deny access to a website. Some websites are not safe to visit or are known to host malware. Some websites are not appropriate for users to browse at work, and WebBlocker can aid in compliance with your corporate policies. Some websites can use a large amount of bandwidth on your internet connection, and you may want to block them to improve the performance of your network. WebBlocker can also improve the accuracy of logging, providing you with greater visibility into the websites that your users are accessing. There are two ways you can define access to websites in WebBlocker: categories and exceptions. Categories are groups of sites that allow you to easily define which types of websites you want to allow or deny access to without having to specify each individual domain. Exceptions, on the other hand, enable you to define access on a per domain or URL basis. Here we are in the Fireware Web UI for my Firebox. I will use the Web UI to demonstrate how to configure WebBlocker, but you can certainly use the WatchGuard System Manager if you prefer. I started by expanding Subscription Services on the left and selecting WebBlocker. Since I haven't configured WebBlocker yet, I will proceed with the Activation Wizard to get started. The first option is to configure the name of my WebBlocker action. This name will appear in the default deny message sent to users, so you may want to rename this to something meaningful. I will just accept the default name. Next, I can choose the categories that I want to allow or deny. Categories are also broken down into subcategories to allow for more specific actions if needed. For example, if I take a look at the bandwidth category, I could deny internet radio and TV without denying internet telephony or other subcategories under bandwidth. I will select the subcategory I want to change, and then under Quick Actions at the top right, I can change the selection to allow, warn, or deny. Allow will let the user access these websites, and deny will stop them from viewing the sites. Warn will display a warning to the user when they try to go to the site, but they can still proceed and view the site if they want. I will set Internet Radio and TV to warn, and once I have done this, you can see the action has changed to warn. One category we always recommend denying is security. From the categories drop-down, I can find security in the list and select it. Looking at the subcategories, you can see that these websites are not something we generally want our users to view. I can select all of the subcategories and then use Quick Actions to set them all to deny. You may want to run WebBlocker with most categories set to allow to start with, and then use the logs and reports to gain a better understanding of which websites users are visiting. All WebBlocker categories are configured to generate log messages by default, but you can disable logging for specific subcategories if you want by clearing these checkboxes. You can also enable alarm logs for any subcategory, which will send you an email notification when a user attempts to view those websites, regardless of the action set for them. Below the category list, there are two other options. The first is to enable WebBlocker overrides. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The last thing on this page is the action for uncategorized URLs. If the website the user is attempting to view has not yet been categorized, then this enables you to choose which action WebBlocker takes. You may want to consider enabling alarm logs for uncategorized sites to easily review when users are accessing them, since some uncategorized sites can potentially host unwanted content. You can always add an exception to block specific websites if needed. Next, WebBlocker applies the new actions to your proxies. I have already configured an HTTP and HTTPS proxy, and they are listed here. I will leave both selected and click Next to apply my WebBlocker actions to my proxies. On the next screen, you can have WebBlocker create new proxy policies for you if you have not already done so. I will leave these unselected and click Next. This completes the wizard. After the wizard is finished, we reach the WebBlocker management page. This page enables you to create and edit the WebBlocker actions and apply them to your web proxies. We can see the WebBlocker action the wizard created for us in the list, and under WebBlocker policies, I can see my two proxies the WebBlocker action is applied to. At the bottom of the page is the Settings button, which we can click on to configure global WebBlocker settings. On the General tab, we can configure an HTTP proxy server if the Firebox is required to use a proxy server in your network to send traffic to the internet. Most environments will want to leave this disabled. We can also configure an on-premise WebBlocker server if one has been deployed. For more information on deploying an on-premise WebBlocker server, refer to the WatchGuard Help Center. On the Cache tab, we can change the settings for the local cache. When a lookup is made for a website, the result is cached on the Firebox. You can change how many cached entries are held and how long they are kept if needed, but most environments should just use the default values. On the Exceptions tab, you can configure global exceptions for WebBlocker. You can add a URL or regular expression here and choose how WebBlocker handles those websites. These exceptions will not be applied by default, but are available for any WebBlocker actions that you choose. Let's go back to the WebBlocker management page and edit our WebBlocker action to take a look at the additional settings available. If you have certain users or administrators who should be able to access websites even if they are denied by WebBlocker, Override enables you to do this. When I enable overrides at the bottom of the categories list, I will get a message that I need to configure either an override passphrase or specify a group of users that are allowed to use this. If I select passphrase and click Edit, I can add a single passphrase that any user can use to bypass the WebBlocker deny action. This can work for some environments, but if unauthorized users learn the passphrase, it would allow them to access restricted websites. The inactivity timeout is the amount of inactive time before the override is disabled for the user. We can also enable logging and alarms to be alerted when the override is used. If I cancel this and select User Group instead and click Edit, I can define a group of users that are allowed to bypass the WebBlocker deny. The groups in this list are configured in the Firebox Users and Groups menu and can be added from the local Firebox user database or an LDAP server like Active Directory. To bypass a denied website, users must log in with their username and passphrase. We recommend using the user group option over the passphrase option because it is more secure and it is easier to audit. Once an override option has been selected, you can also choose which categories can be overridden by changing the checkboxes in the category list. If the checkbox is selected, then users can override the WebBlocker deny. You can also enable overrides in the Quick Actions menu. Each action also has an exceptions list, which we can see on the Exceptions tab. This lets you add a URL or regular expression to specify how WebBlocker handles those websites for this action only. You can also enable Check Global Exceptions if you want this action to apply your global WebBlocker exceptions list as well. If this is not selected, the global exceptions are not applied for this action. Finally, if the URL does not match any configured exceptions, it will fall back to the actions configured in the category list. However, you can disable the categories if you prefer by selecting Deny Website Access. If you deny website access, you must create exceptions that allow access to every website users may need to use, and everything else will be denied regardless of how the categories are configured. On the Advanced tab, we can find some options for how WebBlocker will handle requests when it isn't working. Server timeout defines what happens when WebBlocker is unable to reach the cloud servers to categorize a website. If the lookup fails, then WebBlocker will allow access by default. If WebBlocker is having connection issues, this will allow users to view all websites regardless of their category. License bypass defines what happens if the license for WebBlocker expires. By default, if the license expires, this will cause all websites the users are trying to view to be denied. You may want to change this option to allow, so WebBlocker will fail open instead of failing closed when the license expires, but this could allow users to access websites that would usually be denied. On the Alarm tab, we can configure what happens when an alarm log that you have enabled is triggered. If you are using alarm logs, you want to check Send Notification and leave Email selected. This will send the alarm log to your configured log server, either Dimension or WatchGuard Cloud Visibility. In order for the email notification to function, the firebox must be configured to send log messages to a log server, and email settings must be configured in the log server as well. For more information on how to configure the log server settings and enable email notifications in the server, refer to the WatchGuard Help Center. You can also send a SNMP trap if you are using an SNMP server. Finally, on the Server tab, you can select an on-premise WebBlocker server to be used for this action if you have added one in the global settings. Now that WebBlocker is configured, back on the WebBlocker management page, we can click the Test button to see how specific URLs will be handled. First, choose the WebBlocker action you want to test against, then enter the URL for a website. When you click Test, it will tell you which category the URL belongs to and the action that will be taken for this URL by the WebBlocker action. Let's take a look at the HTTP proxy that we applied WebBlocker to. I will expand Firewall and select Firewall Policies, then edit my HTTP proxy. In the proxy policy, I will select the Proxy Action tab, and if I go to the WebBlocker tab, I can see the action that has been configured. On the Deny Messages tab, I can customize the deny and warn messages that users will receive when WebBlocker or the proxy denies their connection. These are HTML messages, and you can change the message as needed for branding and to provide the best information to the user. You can also preview what it will look like. Here we can see the default deny message, and here is the default warn message. For more information on the variables you can use and how to customize these messages, refer to the WatchGuard Help Center. Now let's take a look at how WebBlocker works in the HTTPS proxy. I will select my HTTPS proxy policy in the list, then go to the Proxy Action tab. On the Content Inspection tab, we can see that currently this HTTPS proxy is not performing content inspection. This means that WebBlocker can only see the server name indicator that is sent as part of the TLS negotiation, which is usually the domain name. The firebox is also unable to present a WebBlocker deny message to the user when content inspection is disabled. The page will just fail to load. In order to check the full URL and to see deny messages using HTTPS, you must enable content inspection. However, content inspection will cause problems loading websites if your environment is not prepared for it. Refer to the WatchGuard Help Center for more information on what is involved with enabling this feature. On the WebBlocker tab, we can see the WebBlocker action that has been applied to this proxy, and we have an additional option available for each category, Inspect. Once you are ready to use content inspection, You can choose to only inspect specific WebBlocker categories instead of by domain name if you prefer. Now the WebBlocker is up and running, I can head over to my log server. In this case, I am using WatchGuard Cloud Visibility. Here we are in WatchGuard Cloud, and I'm looking at the logs and reports for my Firebox. I will expand Web and select the Web Audit Report. This will show me a breakdown of the WebBlocker categories that are being allowed through my network. I can also expand Services and select the Blocked Websites report to see a breakdown of the denied categories. You can expand Detail and use the Web Audit and Blocked Websites reports for more detailed information as well. WebBlocker information will appear in many other places, like the Executive Dashboard, Security Dashboard, Executive Summary, and Per Client reports, just to name a few. So how do we troubleshoot WebBlocker issues? Well, in the Traffic Monitor, we can filter for request categories to locate any proxy logs related to a WebBlocker lookup. These logs will include the domain being requested and the category that was returned. Since WebBlocker is a cloud-based service, the Firebox must be able to resolve DNS and send HTTPS traffic to the internet. If WebBlocker is not working, you can filter for WebBlocker in the Traffic Monitor to locate any diagnostic log messages that the process is generating. In some cases, you may need to increase the diagnostic log level for WebBlocker logging to receive additional information. If WebBlocker is incorrectly categorizing a website, you can request that the category be changed. From the WatchGuard.com website, hover over Support and select the Security portal. Then scroll down to WebBlocker and select Cloud Database. Once you have logged in, you will see this screen. Here you can look up the current category of any URL, and at the bottom you can enter the URL for any miscategorized websites, along with a suggested category. That will do it for getting started with WebBlocker. In this video, we covered what WebBlocker is and how to configure WebBlocker actions to control which websites users can access. We also looked at how you can add and override if needed, and how WebBlocker exceptions can be used to control access to specific domains and URLs. We looked at some WebBlocker reports available in WatchGuard Cloud Visibility and how to troubleshoot WebBlocker issues if you have problems. As always, you can check the WatchGuard technical search for more information.